For 30 years, an ancient animal was dying on a tiny, forgotten island in the Coral Sea. No shark, no net. The thing killing it was the ground beneath its feet. Every nesting season, thousands of females hauled themselves ashore and never crawled back to the water. The bodies stacked up. The eggs vanished beneath the rising tide. No one had the answer. Then a small team tried something almost too simple to take seriously. A fence, the kind that surrounds an ordinary backyard. What happened next changed the future of an entire ocean. On a map of the Great Barrier Reef, Raine Island is hardly worth noticing. A sliver of coral, roughly 800 meters long, about 620 kilometers northwest of Cairns. So remote and so protected that ordinary visitors cannot set foot on it. Twice a year, the turtles come, by the tens of thousands. To the Wuthathi people of Cape York, this place is Thukuru. To the Miriam people of the eastern Torres Strait, it has been tended across more than 60,000 years of continuous knowledge. This nearly invisible spit of coral is what biologists now believe is the single busiest sea turtle nursery on Earth. A mature female green turtle carries a shell about 1.2 meters across and tips the scales at close to 180 kilograms. She spends almost her entire life at sea, gliding across seagrass meadows hundreds of kilometers from shore. But when her body tells her it is time to nest, she turns around. With no landmarks, with drifting currents, she navigates home, back to the sand where she herself hatched, sometimes 3 or 4 decades earlier. In December 2019, researchers flew a small drone over the waters around the island. From the air, the sea looked almost alive with dark shapes, thousands upon thousands, all circling, all waiting. The team had painted a small mark on the shells of about 2,000 turtles the season before, then counted the ratio using the aerial footage. The number stunned the research community. Roughly 64,000 green turtles, surrounding a single island no larger than a couple of football fields. But that figure was only the beginning. When the team compared their new count with decades of older boat surveys, something uncomfortable surfaced. Counting by eye, the population had been quietly undercounted by a factor of nearly 1.73. For Andrew Dunstan, the scientist leading that work, the new number carried 2 meanings at once: comfort and warning. Close to 90% of all green turtles nesting across the northern Great Barrier Reef depend on this single, slim, sinking coral island. If Raine Island failed, that 90% would fail with it. Researchers had been recording what happens here since 1974. For the first 20 years, the work was patient. They tagged females, they counted nests, they followed the rhythm of the seasons. But sometime in the mid-1990s, the rhythm broke. Catherine Robertson, a senior officer on the study, later described what they saw as quietly alarming. Fewer and fewer baby turtles were leaving the sand behind. When the team dug carefully into the failed nests, the answer turned out to be blunt. The eggs were drowning. Across 4 nesting seasons, the share of Raine Island eggs that hatched ranged from just 12 to 36%. On a healthy turtle beach anywhere else in the tropics, that figure sits above 80. The most important nursery on Earth had quietly become one of the least productive. The cause was mechanical. Over decades, the low coral nesting beach had gradually sunk relative to the sea around it. At high tide, salt water was seeping up through the sand into the nests beneath. Around 6 hours underwater cut egg survival by roughly 30%. Every high tide was silently erasing part of the next generation, one nest at a time. Drowning eggs was only half of what was happening. The other half was happening to the mothers. Imagine a 180-kilogram female, built for gliding through open water, almost helpless on land. She hauls herself ashore in the dark. She is surrounded by tens of thousands of other turtles. She crawls inland, searching for open sand, and at last she reaches the rocky cliffs. These are ledges of old phosphate rock, sometimes only 1 or 2 meters high. But for an animal shaped like a low, broad shell, that height is more than enough. She climbs in the dark. She loses her footing. She tips backward and lands upside down on her own armor. A flipped turtle on dry ground cannot right herself. Her flippers paddle helplessly at the sky, and as the tropical sun rises above the reef, she begins to cook. The field crews had given one outcrop a name: Death Rock. In the worst seasons, as many as 2,000 adult breeding females were dying on this single island every year. Studies later showed that cliff falls and ground entrapment alone accounted for roughly 1/3 of every turtle death recorded on Raine Island. They were grown breeding females, the rarest, most valuable individuals in an entire endangered population. They were dying within meters of the place where they had been born, killed not by a predator, but by the shape of the ground beneath them. So in 2014, a small coalition decided to do something almost no one had attempted at this scale. They decided to redesign an island. The work became known as the Raine Island Recovery Project. The Queensland government, the Australian government, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, the mining company BHP, the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, all signed on, alongside the Wutha and Miriam Nation traditional owners. Together, they committed close to $8 million across a planned 5 years. And the very first idea they tested was the strangest of all. To stop turtles from falling off the cliffs, they were going to put a fence between them and the edge. A fence on a coral island 600 kilometers from anywhere to save an ancient reptile. It sounds absurd, but the logic underneath it was precise. The turtles were falling because nothing stood between them and the drop in the dark. The first trial, back in 2011, was laughably small. The crew installed just 100 meters of modified aluminum pool fencing, the exact same kind that surrounds suburban backyards across Australia. 1/2 meter high, with vertical bars about 30 centimeters apart, set along the tops of the small cliffs at the eastern end of the island. The team left the natural ramps completely open. Then they did the only thing that matters in real science. They counted. Before the fence went in, a careful survey found 60 dead turtles. After the fence went in, same stretch of ground, same team, same method, the survey found 2. 60 turtles reduced to 2. The ridiculous idea had worked. And that single result changed everything that followed. Over the next several years, the team scaled that idea around the island. By the time the work was complete, it was ringed by close to 1,750 meters of life-saving fence. And Wutha and Miriam Nation Rangers led the installation themselves, applying tens of thousands of years of cultural and ecological knowledge of this exact stretch of sea country. But a fence could only stop the falling. It could do nothing about the drowning. So the team turned to the second and much harder problem. They were going to lift the beach itself. The operation moved roughly 40,000 cubic meters of material, enough to fill 16 Olympic swimming pools. Using heavy machinery shipped across open ocean to one of the most isolated coral islands on the planet. They reshaped close to 35,000 square meters of nesting beach. Females were laying eggs above the floodline. Turtles spread out across the wider, high beach. 5 years later, independent surveys confirmed the reshaped areas were still stable, still dry, still working. And yet, the project never stopped doing the simplest thing of all. Every morning, a small crew set out on the rescue walk. They flipped overturned females back onto their feet. They pried trapped turtles out of crevices. They carried the exhausted ones, all 180 kilograms of them, back down to the cool of the sea. By one careful count, that daily walk alone saved the lives of 696 nesting females. Accurate numbers turned hope into proof, and the proof was extraordinary. Over the life of the project, the share of turtle deaths caused by cliff falls collapsed from roughly 30% down to about 5%. By the most careful estimates, the fencing alone is now saving more than 500 breeding females every nesting season. With the beach lifted above the tides, the silent drowning that had haunted Raine Island for 30 years began to reverse. The reshaped beaches doubled the amount of viable nesting habitat on the island. And as a direct result of the Raine Island Recovery Project, more than 640,000 additional green turtle hatchlings have already made it off that beach and into the open ocean. 640,000 baby turtles that under the old conditions would never have existed at all. That number is not finished growing. Because of how green turtles actually live, the savings keep compounding across decades. Researchers project that, over the coming decade, millions more hatchlings will emerge from Raine Island. The slow, accumulating interest paid on the lives saved today. There was an unexpected gift in the work as well. The same fencing that kept turtles off the cliffs also kept them out of the island's interior, where vast seabird colonies nest. For decades, wandering turtles had been crushing seabird nests. With the new barriers in place, the seabirds got their ground back. One project, quietly and unintentionally, had begun healing more than a single species. And every so often, Raine Island offers a small reminder of how long these animals have been keeping their appointment with this beach. On one recent trip, researchers recognized a female from her old tag and realized she had first been marked 30 years earlier at a distant feeding ground. After 3 full decades in the open ocean, she had come home to the exact stretch of sand where she was born, to do the exact thing her kind has been doing since the age of the dinosaurs. So here is what Raine Island actually teaches us. The animals were not dying because the world had run out of room for them. They were dying from something fixable, a beach that had sunk a little too low, a ledge that was a little too steep in the dark. The people who loved this place did not look away and call it nature taking its course. They tested a humble idea, a backyard fence, at the smallest possible scale. They measured the result honestly, and when 60 dead turtles became 2, they had the wisdom to build on what worked. Joining the newest science to 60,000 years of knowledge held by the people who have always cared for this island. It is easy to believe that saving an endangered species must require something vast and impossible. Raine Island says otherwise. Sometimes it takes patience, honest measurement, the right partnership, and a fence in the right place. Somewhere off the coast of Australia tonight, the tide is coming in, and it is no longer drowning the next generation. On a beach that was nearly lost, more than 640,000 small turtles have already crawled down to the water and disappeared into the dark, exactly as they were meant to. If uncovering forgotten stories like this is why you are here, consider subscribing. There are more places like Raine Island out there, places where the natural world is quietly, stubbornly winning, and we plan to bring you every one of them we can find. Thanks for watching and for supporting independent documentary storytelling.